Hi, welcome back to day 10 of my 30 days 30 builds challenge, where today's block is moss. Now moss was added back in the Caves and Cliffs update, and since its addition, it has been a real big staple for a lot of building projects that I personally do, as I like the aesthetic that it gives. If you like this sort of content, please leave a like and subscribe, and continue watching if you want. Coming off the back of yesterday's big build, I wanted this build to be a little bit more demure, if you will. I wanted to focus on gradients, as that is a skill that I really want to improve on, as I have a lot of hard lines that I draw in builds, and I wanted something that felt a little bit more continuous while also having the separation of levels. So for today's build, it was really focusing quite heavily on the gradients from stone all the way up into calcite, with the moss accents being in the roofline. As you can see from the start of the build, the gradients aren't the best, but it is something that I work on throughout the course of it, and I just push and pull colours until I get something that looks right. But I wanted to have a foundation down so that I could have a generalised idea of what this structure would end up looking like. Throughout the course of this build, I was using a lot of different references for different elements of the build that I wanted to incorporate. So for example, this outcrop, using lecterns wasn't something that I would normally do, but I saw on a Pinterest board someone using this very similar technique, and I thought I could probably incorporate it into this one. So I gave it a go. It was a lot of fiddling and a lot of just tweaking over and over again, but I think in the end it ended up adding some really good visual interest and a little bit of depth to the side of the build that I don't think I could have done with regular blocks. That was also something that I wanted to discuss in this build, the use of references. Previously, I have been really adverse to that, as I really wanted to have something that was new, creative, and tested my abilities. But I think going forward, that is something that I really want to start incorporating just to lighten the creative load that these builds really place on me, as this is a new venture that I'm going into, and I don't want to overwork myself so early into the game when really I just want to focus on making really good content and increasing viewer retention and stuff like that. With this roofline here, I wanted to try something a little bit classically fantasy style. I do end up changing it, but this overall structure size really persists throughout the build. And while I do flatten out this particular part of the roof, the main structure follows that same peak and tip. A lot of this build's vibes were very mellow. I was going into it with a generalized plan. I had a gradient that I was using as a reference that I had planned out previously, and it was just something that I was just really relaxing with this build. I was just taking it easy. It was my first step back into this after a really long time away, and I just wanted to do something that felt creatively fun instead of something that was extravagant or view farming. That's one of the problems that I can see arising from the making content out of something that you enjoy. It does really fall down that rabbit hole of, wow, I got so many views on my first one, why am I not getting views on a build that I really enjoy, and why is this build suddenly blowing up? It's definitely something that I never thought I would ever encounter. I have never been someone to chase the sort of fame behind any of that, but I can't say that it doesn't take a toll on what you view as a creatively intensive process or something that you view as really impressive if it doesn't get the same reciprocation from other people. But moving on past that, I wanted to build up this overhanging structure and just give a little bit more visual interest to the upper section of this build before moving on to the roofline. I really liked the way that I did these indented windows. I don't know what pursued me to do it this way, but they ended up looking really, really nice, and I would definitely do them in future builds for this sort of style. While I'm finishing up this wall, I also wanted to discuss just the basic voiceover. I'm thinking of doing more of a mellow voiceover from now on, as really I don't think the upbeat style suits me quite as much. I want these videos to be really relaxing, and I want them to be something that people can have on in the background. and I don't want my voice to be really grating like those YouTubers that are just content farming. I want to do this as a hobby, and I don't mind if people don't watch or if they don't click through as much as I would hope. I really want my content to be a bastion of my personality, not of some trends that come through, and I'm very, very mellow when it comes to daily life, and I don't think forcing myself to have a YouTube personality is really going to do me any favors in the long run. With that being said though, when I do other games, I will definitely be changing up the vocal inflections just for the fact of that's the type of game it is. While this might be relaxing, a horror game certainly isn't, and I will be screaming like a little baby while running away from demon monsters. That's just how it is, and I don't want to force that. I want this channel to be a very genuine form of what I produce in life, and I don't really want to force anything. I want my audience to be supportive of whatever I choose to do, and I want to cultivate that environment that breeds that. Now moving on to this wide expansive side, I added in the little jut out like I did in the front just because it was looking a little bit boring. I wanted this build overall to be a very bright build inside with large windows and sort of like a greenhouse aesthetic, which I do add eventually, but for the main build I wanted it to really be something that I would absolutely love to live in with all my plants and everything that needs natural sunlight. So I really went heavy with these open windows and these green vines climbing up the side and these little details that just added vibrancy and life in ways that I haven't in previous builds so far. Now I apologise for the camera clipping, it's just because the build beside it is extremely big and I didn't leave enough room between the two plots. So I did try to fix that when working in Flashback, but it's still a little bit choppy. Now moving on to my favourite part of the build, which is the greenhouse. I wanted to add a little bit of visual difference to this build, and I was using a reference that had a very, very lovely greenhouse attached to the side, so I thought, why not do that as well? So this build is really one that I enjoyed, and as you can see I went crazy in the interior, which is the first time I've ever touched interiors. I just really love greenhouses and plants and all the like, so I wanted that to look good, and because it was all open windows you could always see into it even from the external side, so I wanted it to look like it was used and lived in. Now moving up to this platform, I thought this wall looked a little bland, so I wanted to add in a little bit of visual interest. So I added in this sort of tower-like structure, almost like a wizard's tower, but not quite as prominent with the roof line. And I think it added some really good visual interest here, and it brought up a lot of the grey colours from the lower levels into the upper levels, which was really nice as well. And then it was on to the final details. So on the back here, I added just one single window. I used the same style with the jutting in the mud and the window still full with plants. I added a creeping vine, and then I worked on adding little bits into the roof, just to add a little bit of variance and a little bit of visual interest to the roof line, as well as some green plants and stuff like that. And with all those final details done, we're on to the glamour shots. Now, I forgot to record the building process yet again. It will be something that I'll be improving on in the next video, but I do hope that you enjoy, and I hope you stuck around with me this long. I really appreciate any and all support that these videos get, and I'm really enjoying making them so far. So with that being said, thank you for joining me for day 10, and I really appreciate it. Bye bye.